Welcome to Work Comp Talk, a podcast created for the injured worker here in California. My name is Carmen, your host, and joining me today, Bilal Kassem. He's back. And he's still got that new hairstyle going, so bear with him. The hair will grow. How long does it take for your hair to grow out?
I don't know. Feels like longer and longer these days. Plus, it's more gray than it used to be. So
It's okay. The good thing is we're not doing the podcast for the looks, and we're actually doing it for the tons of information you get from it. I'm talking about tips, lots of information that you get from, people who are doing this for a living, who studied their butt off to be able to understand the system, because it is a very complex system. Of course, we are sponsored by Pacific Workers, the lawyers for injured workers, which also happens to be your company. And today, I was diving into the podcast, and we were essentially going to do a podcast answering a ton of questions. If you have yet to tune into our new little segment we have going on, which is called Ask Bilal, make sure you guys go in to our Pacific Workers YouTube channel and check those videos out. We are constantly answering questions that you guys leave in the comments in a video format. So without further ado, someone recently changed my mind as to what today's topic was going to be. And I think this is an important one, and it's medical buyouts in workers' comp. I figured, you know what? This is something we haven't ever touched on.
Good one.
And let's just dive into it. What is a medical buyout? When does it come into play? What benefits do you get from a medical buyout? I'm assuming from the comment that this person wrote on our podcast, they were in need of this information because they essentially had the ongoing workers' comp where you kind of just get to not settle, but still have some sort of, like if you're going to get a surgery, you get it approved and you kind of still have that medical option open. However, this person keeps getting denied. It's been 4 years and they're constantly getting denied and they're fed up of it. So they want information about a medical buyout.
So in workers' comp, there are two types of settlements. There's something called a stipulated award, which is probably, that's like the default, right? It's like if you get your value of your permanent disability, plus you have an ongoing right to medical care paid for by the workers' compensation insurance company. The problem with a lot of workers' comp medical treatment is that it's always subject to utilization review and IMR. And utilization review is the process by which insurance companies get to decide whether or not they deny or authorize your medical care. IMR is the appeals process, where if your treatment is denied by utilization review, you go to IMR as kind of a second chance. So it's not like when you go to your doctor. You go to your doctor through your own private insurance, and if they want to send you to get an MRI or they want to write you a prescription, they just do it. And that's that. You get it the same day or whatever. It's not a problem. And so a lot of people get frustrated by the fact that they can't get the treatment that their doctor wants them to have in workers' comp because of the utilization review and IMR process. So a lot of times having open medical for life isn't as awesome as it sounds.
It's not as sweet as they make it seem.
Yeah. So a lot of people want to know, like, hey, is there another option to just take medical into my own hands, get money, and be done with the insurance company? And so there is another type of settlement called a compromise and release, where essentially the insurance company is buying out your case. Mm-hmm. You can settle by compromise and release for limited issues or the entirety of the case. So the whole pie or little pieces of it.
Gotcha.
So you could settle a certain issue by compromise and release, like permanent disability, but also have an open medical award. You can also settle out the whole thing, including your medical.
I think it's scary, though. If you are going through a CNR, you would want to think, how do I know what's coming up for me in the future? Like, what if I settle for this and then something scary happens down the line and then I'm screwed because I already settled? So it's like you kind of default to like just a regular settlement without the CNR, just stipulated award, because you want to kind of have that safety net in case something does happen. But then it also backfires you because, according to what this person says, you keep getting denied left and right.
Yeah, and I think it depends on what the case is and what the injury is. There's some people where I actually tell them don't settle out your medical because your medical is potentially invaluable. If you have someone who's, let's say, 20 years old and they're quadriplegic and they need serious care for the rest of their life, maybe the insurance company's not going to offer a number that seems adequate enough to account for the fact that, obviously the costs are going to be substantial and we don't know what those costs are going to be 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years later for this person's life. So that's always a gamble, to some extent, at least in my professional experience with how many cases that, we've done in my office, the lawyers at our firm, we know generally what cases are worth. And so we know what medical care is worth, and we can, I guess, professionally guesstimate
right.
what the cost of medical care is going to be in the future. And we're confident that they'll get an amount that'll take care of them based on whatever the medical recommendations are by their treating physicians or the QME or AME in their case. But, I think more often than not, people look at it and say, I don't really care how much it is. I just think it's better than having the open medical and having to deal with the insurance companies. Of course,
right.
The one thing to remember when you're settling out medical in a workers' comp case is that there is no way to legally force the workers' compensation insurance carrier to buy out your medical care. So it's a bargain for exchange that is completely voluntary. So
of course,
what happens is you run into trouble sometimes where there's the number of what your medical care is really worth on paper, meaning what it's going to cost you in the open market, either out of pocket or with insurance, to get the care you need for the rest of your life. And then there's the number that the insurance company perceives as their financial liability for your case.
Which is always less.
Which is generally less. And so sometimes those numbers can be really close. Sometimes, the insurance company might actually overpay to go away. It just depends on the case. But I would say more often than not, there is a pretty big gap between the two. And so the client is left with a decision to make where they say, look, maybe I'm going to be accepting a number that's less than what my medical is worth, but I can't force them to buy out my medical. At the same time, I'm frustrated because I can't even get, PT authorized, or I can't get medication authorized, or I can't even go see my doctor because it's taking so long. And maybe the ability to provide some medical care for myself is better than no medical care or the shit medical care I'm getting from the insurance company.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like, how is it really worth the battle for you to continue to fight it when you already have all odds against you because they keep denying all this stuff, So in the long run, you really do have to think about that. So let's just say that is the case, right? You're getting denied and you do the medical buyout. You don't get exactly what you're looking for, but you get some. Then can you move your case? Because I know that you can't see doctors if it's a work-related injury. How does that come into play?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the common issues. There are labor code statutes that pertain to this. It's illegal for a medical provider to knowingly bill you for work comp related medical treatment. There are exceptions to that. And so generally speaking, it's not a problem for someone once their case is closed to go see their own doctor. But really it's intended to preclude insurance companies while the case is still ongoing to offset their liability by offloading the responsibility to pay for medical care onto either the injured worker or third-party insurance.
Right. So like your medical insurance provided by your job, it's not their job to pay for something that workers' comp should have paid for.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And so it's there to preclude that, right? Because they want to incentivize, the medical to be covered by the insurance carrier while the case is pending. The one thing about pricing that I'll say is a little bit different is there's something in California, it's called official medical fee schedule. It's pretty generic, but essentially it sets the rates at which things are billed and paid in work comp medical treatment. It's different than other areas. So for example, for our local Bay Area people, if you were to go to, a knee surgeon at Stanford for a total knee replacement, the medical bill is probably going to be over $100,000.
Of course.
You might not pay that, but that's what they're going to bill your insurance. In work comp, you're looking at maybe like $40,000 in terms of the billing to get something like that done. And so essentially what had happened is, when you go back in the day when work comp was created, the whole idea was to limit costs for employers and insurance companies because it was supposed to be no fault.
Yeah.
And along with that, they set rates for medical treatment. And so the whole idea is to keep costs down. And so generally speaking, work comp is going to pay lower rates for medical care, whether it's surgeries or medication or anything else, than what would cost you out in the open market or what your insurance would be billed in the open market. And so that kind of puts a wedge again between the value to you because you're taking the money to go do things on your own or with your own private insurance, but work comp is just looking at the cost on their side, which may already be substantially less than the open market.
Yeah, that's a scary decision to make because it's kind of like I'm going to put myself out there, but for me, it's going to cost me triple the amount that it's going to cost the workers' comp insurance. Do you take that risk? When do you take that risk? When you, obviously we talked about it right now. You said if you're getting crappy, I guess, health or medical treatment from the insurance company, and they're denying you left and right, and it's just a struggle to get things that you need, is it worth the battle? It's like, dude, that's a really hard decision, and that's a big pickle to be in if you're injured. Because one, you want to get better. Mm-hmm. Two, you're in pain. Three, of course you don't want to pay triple the amount of the price. But again, if you have insurance and it's only a copayment or whatever, honestly, I would rather take that and be done with it and feel better than to feel miserable and fight something that essentially is probably not going to get anywhere.
I mean, I would say, I was hoping I'd give you a percentage of like clients that I'd say prefer to have medical versus not.
Well, can you?
I can't. It's difficult. But I would say more often than not, for the most part, clients prefer a medical buyout. I don't know a specific percentage, but this is, after thousands and thousands and thousands of cases that we've done at the firm, I can say with certainty the highest number of settlements are medical buyouts rather than keeping it open.
Now, you mentioned something that it's not obligated for the insurance company to buy you out.
Yeah.
What happens if you're stuck with that option, that they're not going to buy out your medical and you don't want to keep doing it? Then what?
I mean, there's no way to force it, unfortunately. There's no legal...
Damn.
You have no legal right to demand that they buy out your medical care.
Right.
You can leverage it. You can say, okay, well, if you don't want to buy out my medical, I'm going to run up the bill as much as possible. I'm going to go to every single doctor appointment I can. I'm going to take every medication I can. I'm going to go to all the PT I can. I'm going to do literally everything I can to make this extremely expensive for you. And maybe that would incentivize them. But there's a lot of times where the insurance company just says, look, we're not interested. It doesn't matter. Treat as much as you want. We're not going to buy out your medical. And that does happen sometimes. And, there's nothing we can do about that. Sometimes they change their mind later. So, for example, if you settle a case by a stipulated award with open medical care, you can actually go back at any time in the future and actually negotiate a buyout whenever you want, if they want to. So, you have clients who've come to us several years after they've settled their case by stipulated award, said, look, I'm just not interested in keeping my work comp insurance. I'm good. I think I've healed. I'm probably not going to treat that much. I'd like to close it out. And we go back to the insurance carrier and say, look, client just wants to be done with this. Give us whatever amount of money we value the case at. And if we come to an agreement, great. Then they sign new settlement documents and they pay the client out and they're done.
That would be the easy route. What if they don't come to an agreement?
Then they just keep their medical, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, it's a difficult situation to be in, but I guess it's a case-by-case situation where you really have to outweigh what the situation is. If you really are in pain, and like we mentioned earlier, then it would make sense to go to a doctor that's actually going to take that pain away, even if that means losing out on having the workers' comp kind of be liable for it. But if your ultimate goal is to feel better, then you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, and I think it boils down to what's going on with the client. What's their condition, what are the medical treatment needs. I had a client the other day who had a pretty serious back injury, and the doctor had recommended that they do a fusion surgery, which, I mean, good outcomes, bad outcomes. The bad outcomes can be catastrophic for someone. Yep. And so when I look at treatment like that, that's, the client just doesn't want to do it right this second, but it's like an inevitability that they're going to need that done. Sometimes I'll tell the client, hey, look, don't, if it's within 5 years, we can reopen your case. If you're going to get the surgery just next year, not this year or something, maybe we should wait, because if the surgery doesn't go right and we settled everything out and now you can't walk, you're paraplegic or, whatever, you're in so much pain that you just can't do anything. And the settlement's not going to represent that value.
Yeah.
It's going to be based on what your case currently looks like. So sometimes if there's high risk surgeries and things like that that are on the agenda, I'll usually tell the client, hey, maybe you should consider not buying it out and just wait until you decide whether or not you're going to do that to eliminate some of the risk.
Yeah, it makes sense because, like you said, if things turn out for the worse and then you kind of already settled, you screwed yourself over. So it's a lot to think about. A medical buyout is not something that you just I want this much. This is how it works and it's going to happen. One, it's not guaranteed that you're going to get a medical buyout from the insurance company. Two, it's a very important decision you're going to make because essentially either it will fall on your pocket or you suffer because you're going to go through the shitty system, which is something that I think pushes a lot of people to go through a medical buyout.
Mm-hmm. And something, we didn't talk about yet, but it's a very important consideration are resignations in workers' comp. Ooh. So normally you have insurance providers that have, generally year-long coverage for employers. And when an insurance provider is still insuring an employer, the technical term in the industry is called being on the risk. The idea is the risk that they have to pay, right? The risk that there's injuries, the risk that there's liabilities. So generally, insurance providers don't like to settle with medical buyouts where the injured employee is still actually employed at the same location where they're providing insurance coverage.
Right.
And the reason is, let's say you hurt your back, you fall down, whatever. I give you, I settle your case for $25,000 and $15,000 of that's supposed to be the medical buyout portion. And you're like, great. You go back to work the next day and then you slip and fall again and hurt your back and now it's worse. Well, guess what? They may have to provide medical care again. So what was the point of settling it out in the first place and giving you that money for the medical? So they look at your ongoing employment as potential risk that you're going to get hurt again and that they're going to have to pay you more money. And so they can't require that you resign from your employment. But in the industry, there's this kind of ongoing negotiation where they say, well, we're not obligated to buy out your medical care, but you're not obligated to resign. And if you want to buy a medical buyout, then we would like you to resign, but we're not going to force you. And so, usually there's that song and dance too, where it's like, okay, well, do you actually like your job? Can you go find a new job? Did you want to switch anyways? Do you love your job? Is your pay and benefits really good? And so this doesn't make sense to take a medical buyout just to sign a resignation. Or if you are resigning, we should be asking for more money because your resignation has value in it. So there's that component. I think when someone is injured and they have work restrictions so they can't go back to their job and they're forced out of their employment, that's a non-issue.
Yeah.
Then it doesn't matter. But, when you have someone who's an existing employee, that does come up in cases.
Dude, that's a lot to think about. So what would you tell someone who doesn't have representation by a lawyer and needs to kind of put everything out on the table? Like, obviously, take a look at your case, figure out what your needs are. But would you recommend them speaking to an attorney and kind of getting their 2 cents in it as opposed to them just doing it on their own?
I mean, every case is different. Obviously I'm biased because I know everything. So I was like, oh yeah, talk to someone who knows everything before you make a decision. It's like if you were going to buy a car, would you just go to the dealership and trust the dealer? And if you went to a car dealership and said, hey, my budget's $50,000, I want a car, or $20,000, I want a car, they're probably going to give you the shittiest car possible for the most amount of money possible and get you out of there and sign you up for warranties you don't need and protection plans and blah, 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 right?
Right.
Why would you trust the insurance company in the same way to have your best interests at heart, going blindly in there with, your health and welfare and your ability to care for yourself and your family and trusting everything they say? Absolutely not. No one would do it. It applies to everything you do in life.
It's funny you said no one would do it, but they do it.
I mean, yeah, it's probably not the smart, but you date before you marry someone. You read Yelp reviews before you try restaurants. You look at school districts before you buy houses. You tour buildings before you rent an apartment. You do all these things to educate yourself in life. Why would it be any different in a workers' comp case? And so
because it's a different era. Have you not seen Married at First Sight?
90 Day Fiance or whatever. Love is Blind. All the
Love
shows
is
my
Blind.
wife watches.
It's it's a whole different, no, but it's great that you're putting it out there. I think if you value your health and if this is something you really want to not mess up,
it's an important decision.
It is.
And talking to an attorney, you can at least help educate yourself. You don't have to sign up with them. You can tell them to go pound sand. You don't want their help, but go.
But at least
take advantage of them for like a free hour of their legal experience. Because I worked very hard for my legal experience. I went to school a long time, and I've been doing this for a very long time. So I have a lot of knowledge that I'm always happy to share with people. And if you want to talk to us and get our feedback and opinion without necessarily having us help you, that's cool. But I would say at least talk to an attorney.
Yeah.
Get their opinion. Get feedback. It's not going to hurt. They're not going to charge you. And at least kind of understand where you are and whether there's anything they can do for you to help improve what you're going through.
Definitely. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us about medical buyouts. It's definitely something not to be taken lightly, and I hope there's something that you picked up from this podcast episode. Or if you know someone that needs this information, please feel free to share it. Like us. Make sure you guys subscribe so that you know when we upload a new episode. The idea is to continue to throw as much information out there for free, because why not? Bilal knows it, and I like to pick his brain, and we have topics that we can discuss. So if you have anything in mind, make sure you guys drop also a comment on our YouTube channel, and we can try to see if we can also create an episode off of it. So thanks for your time, Bilal. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe.